They called me a nobody, loud enough to shatter the glass in her hand. Funny, really. The man she was about to marry had used my landmark ruling on tenant rights as the foundation for his own law review article. Name's Michael Grayson, 53 years old. I still carry that old judicial pin in my coat pocket, though I haven't worn it in years. Ever been erased by your own blood, only to be applauded by strangers? That invitation came without my name. Just Miss Clara Grayson and fiancé cordially invite you to celebrate their union. No dear Michael, no brother, no handwritten address label. Just the sterile, laser-printed square tucked inside a pearlescent envelope that smelled faintly of a stranger's cologne, the kind of scent you find in five-star hotels, the kind that says, "This isn't really yours, but take it anyway." I stared at it for what felt like hours, still sealed. It arrived the day before, but I waited until nightfall to touch it again. That envelope rested beside my elbow on the desk, sandwiched between a faded commendation from the New York Bar Association and an old brass letter opener I hadn't used in years. My office, once alive with the soft murmur of legal briefs and the scratching of pens on paper, now breathed the hollow silence. That silence you learn to live with, the kind that never quite becomes peace. I cracked the seal with the side of my thumb and pulled out the invitation. Inside was another smaller card, cream-colored, written in a familiar, flowing script. "Please don't ruin her day. Just stay away. Mom." I read it twice, 3 times, hoping the ink might soften, bend, maybe even apologize. But her words remained cold, unyielding, like her voice had always been. 10 years ago, after I testified against a powerful friend of my father's, a local tycoon who turned monstrous behind closed doors, my mother called me from the porch. "We don't air our family's dirty laundry in courtrooms, Michael," she said quietly, without anger, without a tremor. And then she shut the door. "No, I raised you better than this. No, I'm sorry." That was the last true thing she ever said to me. Now I sat there, haunted by that memory, real and sharp as the old leather chair behind me. My fingers brushed over piles of unopened letters, all bills, ads, or silence pressed into paper. But beneath them, hidden, was one envelope I never discarded, slightly yellowed, addressed in the confident, slanting hand of a man who died 2 springs ago, Judge Benjamin Clark. Not my family by law, but if wisdom measured a father's worth, he eclipsed mine in every courtroom. I opened his letter again, though I knew every word by heart. "Silence isn't always peace, Michael. Some legacies are born in quiet." He wrote that the year before he passed, after I declined an invitation to speak at a conference named in my honor. I never replied. I couldn't. What would I say? Sorry? I'm the kind of man who once made the truth so loud he lost his own family. My eyes drifted to the corner of the desk where a navy box lay untouched. I reached for it carefully, the way you pick up something that once meant everything. Inside, nestled in blue velvet, was my old judicial pin, the very one Judge Clark slid into my hand the day I was sworn in. The one I hadn't worn since the tribunal told me honor and family don't always ride in the same carriage. I placed the pin carefully on the desk. Then, with a breath that didn't feel like my own, I opened my laptop and typed Ethan Cole Law Firm, New York. A profile popped up. Civil rights attorney, university speaker, columnist in national publications. One article caught my eye. I clicked. The headline read, "We the people still means us." I expected jargon about equity, precedent, and reform. But halfway through, a quote stopped me cold. "Justice isn't the loudest gavel in the room. It's the one that leaves room for someone else's silence." attributed to Honorable Michael Grayson, State Supreme Court, 2012. I blinked, not out of shock, but because those words no longer felt mine. They felt borrowed, relics boxed away with every diploma, clipping, and letter that didn't say, "Dear Brother." I closed the tab knowing with certainty I was going. The room was set for everyone except me. Each guest had a name card, but mine was just a blank, cream-colored tent, folded neatly on a plate. Whoever placed it there did so with care. The crease was sharp, the paper matched the rest of the table's elegant design, but no name, no Michael, no Judge Grayson, just a silent placeholder for someone they hoped wouldn't show up. I ran my thumb along the edge of that empty card before lowering myself into the chair. It was firm and plain, probably rented, but it held my weight as if it were unfamiliar with long guests. The rehearsal dinner took place in a renovated vineyard about 30 minutes outside New York. String lights crisscrossed above, like someone was trying to trap the stars between rows of tables and weathered wine barrels. White tablecloths draped every surface. The plates were simple, ceramic. Hors d'oeuvres came out on small wooden trays, shrimp cocktail, deviled eggs, tiny smoked cheese balls. I wasn't offered any, not that I expected to be. A waiter floated past, balancing a tray of champagne flutes, and I gave a subtle shake of my head. He nodded once and moved on. 2 seats away, a cousin I hadn't seen since Clara's graduation narrowed her eyes at me. Her lips parted as if to speak, but then she turned away. I adjusted my tie. Dark navy suit, white shirt, no tie clip, classic, forgettable. Just enough polish to pass as someone who belonged, maybe a distant cousin from the West Coast or a neighbor from a nicer part of town. Near the head table, I spotted Clara. She moved like a hostess in a commercial, light on her feet, smiling at groups, her hand resting gently on arms and shoulders. A perfect Southern mix of sweetness and steel. She laughed, nodded, and moved on, never once meeting my eyes. I looked down at the place setting again. Fork, knife, blank card. The menu was embossed in elegant letters. Welcome dinner for Clara and Ethan, March 2024. No trace of my name anywhere. I'd seen this before. Not the dinner, not the vineyard, but the blankness. There was a photo from Clara's college graduation that used to hang in the family hallway, until I stopped visiting. A group shot on the lawn. Mom, Dad, Clara in her robe, aunts, uncles. I stood at the edge, one hand on Clara's shoulder, the other tucked in my pocket. When the photo was posted online, my arm was there, but my face had been cropped out. When I asked Clara about it, she said, "Oh, that was just a layout decision, Instagram formatting." I nodded then, just like I nodded now. Across from me, a woman whispered, "Who is that guy?" Another voice answered, "He looks familiar. Is he on Ethan's side?" A plate landed gently in front of me, deviled eggs and 2 shrimp. I hadn't asked for anything, but the server, a young man with nervous hands, lingered just a moment too long. "Mr. Grayson," he said before catching himself. "Sir, sorry." I met his eyes. "No problem." He hurried off, visibly rattled. I picked up a deviled egg, twirled it once on my fork, and set it down. I wasn't hungry. At the edge of the room, Ethan stood beside a groomsman. His posture was casual, but his gaze locked on me. He didn't look away when I noticed. Instead, he leaned in and said something brief and deliberate to the man beside him. Then he nodded once, subtle but clear, and his eyes returned to me. I held the gaze just a moment longer, then dropped my eyes to my plate. There was still no name card in front of me, but I no longer felt invisible. When Ethan said, "Judge Grayson," the room froze. Even the string quartet paused mid-note. Even the ice in Clara's glass seemed to refuse melting. I was swirling wine in my glass like you do when pretending to be relaxed. The glass never made it to my lips. I tilted it just enough to catch the chandelier's glint, a distorted halo over a room full of people pretending to be perfect. The private dining room looked like a magazine spread. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the twinkling lights of New York City. Navy and blush decor draped the space like it had something to prove. At the center, a mahogany table lined with name cards and centerpieces made of soft pink roses flickered in candlelight. My card was still nameless, marked only reserved. Clara sat 3 seats to my left, next to our mother, Linda. She wore a pearl brooch and wore the exact expression she had when I told her I was going to law school instead of joining the family business. She hadn't spoken to me since the rehearsal dinner. Now her fork rested untouched, and her napkin was folded perfectly in her lap. I didn't expect warmth, but her silence was colder than the wine. Ethan stood and raised his glass for a toast. His tone was measured, eyes sweeping the table slowly. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," he said. "Some of you have been part of our journey since day one. Others I'm honored to get to know better." He paused, looked right at me. "When I was in law school, there was a case I couldn't get out of my head. Tenant rights. Clean, precise, damn near poetic. The ruling even made it into the Harvard Law Review. I remember thinking, this guy sees people, not just statutes." The author was Judge M. Grayson. His eyes locked onto mine. "You wouldn't happen to be him, would you?" Clara stiffened, like a sudden cold wind wrapped around her spine. Her fingers clenched the base of her glass. Her lipstick smudged slightly at the corner, just enough for me to notice. The room held its breath. I didn't smile, didn't flinch. I raised my glass in Ethan's direction and said, "You have good taste in legal scholarship." A ripple passed through the table, whispers skipping like stones across water. "He's a judge, did you know?" "I thought Clara said he was gone." Clara sprang up from her seat, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "He's nothing, he's nobody," she spat. Her voice cracked, just loud enough to silence the whispers. Every eye swung back to me. For a moment, no one moved. I set my glass down, calm and deliberate. Then I spoke softly, but with the full weight of years stripped away, denied, and folded into silence. Apparently, being nobody still got me published in the Harvard Law Review. The clink of a fork hitting porcelain echoed from across the room. Someone exhaled sharply. A cousin lowered her eyes. Clara's face flushed, not from embarrassment, but panic. She reached for her glass and missed. Champagne spilled across the white tablecloth, running in rivulets toward the roses. She muttered under her breath, grabbed a napkin, and dabbed frantically, as if trying to reverse time. Then she turned and left. No apology, no glance back. The string quartet resumed softly, like they were trying to patch the broken silence. Linda looked down, lips tight, hands folded, like she was saying grace for an outcome she couldn't prevent. Ethan remained standing, eyes locked onto me. He didn't speak, and he didn't need to. The toast was over, but something else had begun. I looked around the table at the faces who had erased me from their history. Relatives who whispered versions of me out of the family record. They looked at me now as if I had been rewritten right in front of them, and I hadn't raised my voice once. Sometimes dignity speaks loudest when you let the silence do the talking. By 8 a.m. the next day, my inbox was a graveyard of links. Subject lines screamed accusations in bold font. Judge Grayson, hero or hypocrite? Anonymous sources reveal past misconduct. Why the Grayson family cut ties? Even a Reddit thread pinned my name between conspiracy theories and homemade memes. Someone had even photoshopped me behind a podium with devil horns. Classy. Rain tapped steadily at the courthouse window, like a ticking metronome.
Outside, the city glistened with the kind of wet fog that makes everything look both clean and condemned. Inside, my office stayed the same. Same worn leather chair, same smell of old books and fresh coffee. One folder sat open, untouched. The only thing louder than the rain was the pinging of news alerts lining up for dismissal. I leaned back, hands folded. The smear campaign wasn't elegant, but it had reach. A few recycled rumors about a mistrial from 15 years ago. Allegations long disproven, revived by blogs that never met a clickbait they didn't love. This wasn't coincidence, it was strategy. I remembered something I told a law student once when she hesitated to file a harassment report against a professor. If your truth threatens someone's illusion, they'll fight back with fiction. And here we were. My phone lit up. Maya.
Morning. I said, "You've seen it?" She replied, "No question." Yup. I flagged the top 5 articles. Do we fight head-on or let it rot? I heard the tension in her voice, laced with caffeine and protective fury. Maya wasn't just my communications advisor. She was the storm you call in when your reputation is on fire. We answer, I said. Not with outrage, with facts. A pause. That's why I stayed. By 9:30 a.m., I'd typed up a 1-page press release. No emojis, no hashtags, just certified dismissal of the prior claims. A decade-old letter from the Judicial Ethics Review Board, 3 quotes from legal peers, a copy of my award from the Innocence Project for overturning 2 wrongful convictions. At the bottom, I added a small line in fine print. Facts are stubborn things. John Adams. I didn't even post it to my personal account. Maya placed it quietly on the courthouse's transparency portal. No drama. By noon, the tide shifted. The comment sections beneath the worst articles bloomed with responses no PR firm could manufacture. Judge Grayson is the only one who looked me in the eye when I was terrified in court. He came to my son's funeral when no one else did. You don't erase a man like that with gossip. No bots, no spin. Just testimonials that crawl out of silence when truth is on the ropes. Some came from former clients, others from students, clerks, even a defendant who'd once served time because of a ruling I made. He wrote, "He sentenced me, but he was the first man to tell me I mattered before he did." That one made me sit still for a while. A colleague stopped by my office, awkward and concerned. "Want me to write a rebuttal in the journal?" I shook my head. "It's handled." He left, confused by my calm. I suppose it's hard to grasp dignity when you've only seen defense. The rain continued its steady rhythm. The city hummed. Then my phone vibrated. No name, just a number. One line. "You made your point. Now stay away." I stared at the text. Didn't blink, didn't answer. I placed the phone face down, leaned back, and let the silence settle. They arranged the ceremony in a circle, seats perfectly aligned like petals on a flower, each wrapped in ivory linen and adorned with handwritten name tags. Aunt Ruth, Cousin Jared, Uncle Lou, even second cousins who hadn't been seen since 2009. Everyone but one. The chair farthest from the aisle, beneath the shade of a birch tree, had no name. Just a folded linen napkin resting silently on the cushion. I took it without question. The garden was quiet in that way. The kind of silence you feel more than hear. Expensive venues are polished silence, engineered serenity. Golden light pulled against tall arrangements of blush roses and pale eucalyptus while soft classical music drifted from hidden speakers. It should have felt like peace, but I knew better. Around me, eyes flicked like camera shutters. Curious, cautious, withholding. My cousin Na leaned toward her husband and whispered something. He nodded without looking. A few others stole half glances, then decided against approaching. I wasn't part of the script. They didn't know their lines for this scene. I crossed one leg over the other and rested both hands on my knee. No need to fill the space. The officiant, a man with a beard too perfect to be sincere, began naming family members who had helped plan the day. "We'd like to acknowledge those who made this day possible." He called Linda. He called Emily's college roommate. He called Aunt Ruth again, apparently forgetting he'd already said her name.
But he didn't call mine. It wasn't a surprise, but it landed like a practiced silence. Ethan stood near the front, fingers interlaced, a folded paper in his hands. Emily stood beside him, smile frozen in perfect poise. She looked radiant and carved, like a statue that would crack if touched. At one point, she glanced toward me just once, but her eyes darted away before focus could land. That look wasn't fear. It was preservation, like seeing a mirror and refusing to recognize the reflection. The speeches began, toasts full of charm and selective memory. One uncle recalled Emily as a peacemaker since childhood. Another joked about her diplomatic way of settling monopoly disputes. I sipped from a water glass, watching the sun slip lower, turning rose petals translucent at the edges. Then Ethan took the mic. He unfolded his paper with a care that felt deliberate. He looked once at Emily, then scanned the garden until his eyes stopped on me. "I didn't grow up with a strong male role model," he began, voice steady. "But in law school, I came across a ruling that shifted the way I thought about fairness, about truth." He paused. He remembered the author, not because of the name, but because of the clarity and courage.
Another pause. That ruling was by Judge Grayson. Wherever you are, thank you. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sharp, like glass. You don't realize you're stepping on it until it cuts. Emily's jaw stiffened. Her shoulders didn't move, but everything else in her seemed to unravel. She took a breath sharp enough to be heard. Then, without warning, she stepped down from the small stage. She didn't look at Ethan. She didn't look at the guests. She walked past the floral arch, past the line of photographers, and made her way straight across the courtyard, directly toward me. In her hand was a small white envelope. No one dared say a word. Forks paused mid-air. Glasses hovered untouched. Even the breeze seemed to wait. She stopped in front of me, eyes unreadable. Then, with a precision too calm to be mistaken for emotion, she slipped the envelope onto my lap. No words, no expression. She turned and walked back the way she came. The officiant cleared his throat. A string of silverware clinked somewhere behind me. Someone whispered a question. No one answered. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. Inside, a single photo. No note, no message. Just a single image tucked inside the same envelope I hadn't touched for weeks. It was from my father's 60th birthday, the last family event I attended before everything fell apart. I remembered the original well. Long banquet table, cake slightly off-center, my mother in pearls, my sister mid-laugh, and an unremarkable space where I should have been. But in this version, I was there, not photoshopped out, restored. I didn't know who had the original. I didn't know if it was guilt, nostalgia, or something quieter. But I was there again, between Uncle Lou and Emily, smiling. A kind of smile that doesn't last, but manages to be caught on camera. It was enough. I left the photo on the corner of my desk beside notes for an upcoming judicial summit. Maya had just finished arranging the last press packets. "You've got 5 minutes," she said, glancing at her watch, then at me. "The room's full. They even set up overflow seating." I nodded. She paused, then added gently, "Your name's on the banner." "First line, I saw," I said. Took a photo, didn't post it. She smiled and left, letting the door ease shut. I stood alone in the green room, adjusting my tie. Not because it was crooked, because some habits survive everything. On the wall behind me hung framed photographs of past keynote speakers, judges, activists, authors, people whose words had outlasted applause. I knew some of them. Brandon Carter's photo wasn't there, but I could still hear his voice. Some records, Jacob, aren't on paper. They're written in who you become. The room filled quickly. Rows of chairs, heads turning. A hush falling as I approached the podium. No one asked where I'd been. No one mentioned the blogs or the gossip. No one said Emily's name, and I didn't either. Instead, I told them a truth they already felt. The law remembers what people try to erase. Some families bury the wrong names. Some institutions do too. But what matters most, what stays, is not wealth or lineage or power. It's whether you showed up, and whether you did what was right when no one asked you to. I let the silence hang. Not dramatic, just honest. A few nodded. A few wiped their eyes. I scanned the crowd without searching. Then I saw her. A young woman near the back. Brown curls, wide eyes, public defender badge clipped to her jacket. She approached slowly after the session ended. Her voice caught as she began. "Judge Grayson," she said, "your ruling in the Thompson case. My client got to keep her home, and I got to stay in law school because of that." I looked at her, really looked, and saw not just gratitude, but grit. She would fight longer and harder than I ever could now. I reached into my inner pocket, pulled out the old judicial pin, the one I hadn't worn since the day they told me I'd brought shame to the name. I placed it in her hand. "Wear it when you need a reminder." She nodded, too moved to speak. The applause came again. Not loud, not thunderous, but steady, kind. I didn't stay for networking or photos, didn't linger near the coffee station, or let anyone pitch me a book deal. I stepped out into the evening. No parade, no headlines, just the quiet tap of my shoes on concrete, and the photo still in my breast pocket. A man remembered not by noise, but by presence. And somehow, that was enough. Even if I was only known by one person in that crowd, or just by myself. Sometimes all it takes is one old photo to remind you that you were there, even when the world tried to crop you out. I've learned that silence doesn't mean surrender, and dignity doesn't need applause. Family won't always choose truth, but we can choose it for ourselves. And that's enough. If this story touched a memory or moment in your own life, feel free to share.